among the many names that has been discussed on this podcast, there always seems to be that one name, that one guy, that one player even that always seems to be brought up by myself or even the audience, and that's fine, or the guest. And that's Jon Elmore. Jon Elmore has been a great person within the Kanawha Valley, went to GW, actually went to South Charleston before going to GW, went to play at Marshall. So I just thought he's been talked about so much. It's almost like when you're reading a book and they keep mentioning this character, you're like, when am I going to talk, or when am I going to be introduced officially to this character? Well, here we go. So let's get into his bio, because again, it's always great to just discuss and dissect what all they have done in their career. First off, we'll start with the TBT note, since that is where we are right now, because it's a Sunday. This is a Sunday podcast, and at 5:00 this evening, Heard That will be playing the Founding Fathers, which is a James Monroe alumni team. So this is his fourth season playing in the TBT. Played in 2019 with the West Virginia Wildcats, and then 2020, 2021, and now this year he's playing with Heard That, primarily a Marshall University alumni team. He just finished playing overseas in Lithuania, averaging 16 points a game and 6 assists as well. Like I said, he graduated from George Washington. He was West Virginia's Mr. Basketball in 2014, captain of the 2014 class AAA first team, averaging 31 points per game his senior season. He was a 2-star recruit coming out of high school, which we'll talk about later on down the road. He originally committed to play for VMI, which is where his dad, Gay Elmore, went. And then he went to Marshall. So let's talk about Marshall. He was recruited following his performance on a Marshall intramural team in 2015. We'll talk about that, believe me. He helped lead Marshall to their first NCAA tournament appearance in program history in 2018, became the third Marshall player to record 2,000 career points, became Conference USA's all-time leading scorer in 2019. He's the conference's all-time leader in assists at 783 and three-pointers made at 356. He became the first Division I player to record 2,500 points and over 750 assists. And he also broke Marshall's all-time scoring record his senior season that was originally owned by Skip Henderson. So without further ado, please introduce Mr. Jon Elmore himself. Jon, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Well, for the audience, if you guys remember a few episodes back when we had Tavian Dunn-Martin from Huntington, I had to start off the podcast with a story that really I always think about whenever somebody says Tavian Dunn-Martin. So I'm going to do the same thing with Jon, because Jon doesn't know this. I was a lot younger whenever I played him. I never played him in high school, but I played against him in a pickup style before I even was in high school. I think it was like, I want to say 5th or 6th grade or something like that. And my dad and Jon's dad actually played pickup basketball a lot, and then also my uncle played basketball with Gay as well. So I asked my dad, I was very ambitious, wanted to get started in basketball, and I said, I want to play with some older competition. He said, all right, I got the group of guys for you. So there was a night where, I don't remember exactly what night, it might have been a Thursday, but he takes me up to George Washington High School. And it was actually whenever Jon was at G-Dub. And I go there, we get teams situated, and the very first game, I am matched up against Jon. And Jon still has a little bit of height on me, because I was not quite as tall as I am now. I'm like 6'4", pushing 6'5", something around there. But they matched me up with Jon because they saw my size. They were just like, go against Jon. Let's just see how you do. You want to get good? Go against Jon. So I said, I don't know about that, because before that, he was just draining threes, probably like 25, 26 feet outside of the basket. I'm just like, I don't know about this. No, just see how it goes. Just try it. I said, okay, fine. So we're going up and down the court. Second possession for this team. Second possession. Jon gets the ball up the court. You know, I'm getting in my defensive stance. All of a sudden, Jon just comes up, take 2 steps inside of half court, and he just goes right over me. And I can't do anything. I swear to you, I couldn't do anything. Rises up above me, just drills it. And I looked over at my dad, and I just sort of shrugged. I was like, are you going to do anything? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's got like 3 more inches on me, and he's got like a Kevin Durant shot. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? He said, just do it again. I said, fine, whatever. So all of a sudden, they just keep feeding Jon the ball, and they're just like, all right, everybody clear out. I'm like, oh, this is great. This is just what I needed. I'm playing against older guys. I'm going up against Jon Elmore. This is not good. So then Jon gets the ball again. Same thing. Probably 3 feet this time. Man, who cares? 1 foot difference. 3 feet inside a half court. He just pulls up another 3. And he makes it. And some guy looked at me. He's like, man, there's not a whole lot you can do. I'm like, You think that there's not anything I can do about it. I mean, the man is just pulling up anywhere, and he's got the automatic green light. I mean, dude, you could shoot. You could just flat out shoot the ball. You can still shoot now, but dude, in high school, you could just shoot. Because I even saw you play against Winfield, my alma mater, in high school, and it was your senior season. I mean, same scenario. Winfield didn't know how to respond. I mean, unbelievable. Do you know how good you could shoot the ball in high school? Like, do you ever like look back and you're just like, I could shoot the ball, man.
Uh, Sometimes, I got to give credit just to my dad and my grandpa, just because um, there was a lot of hours put in the gym with them, just repetitioning, form shooting, practicing. So, I was just lucky to have the support system that I did growing up.
So talk about your dad because everybody knows your dad, especially down in the Canal Valley area. Went on to play at VMI, became the all-time leading scorer in VMI history. How much of an impact did your dad have on your life and basketball growing up?
Man, I don't even think words can kind of summarize it. That was always I never saw him play live. Like, I've never seen film or anything, just because he's a dinosaur. But that was always my favorite player and the guy that I modeled my stuff after. As far as I can remember, like, even when I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old, he was taking me to the park playing against adults, grown ups, grown men. And, I had to find a way to be effective and have a reason to be in the game, because usually when you're playing against grown men, they don't want to play against kids. So um taught me from a young age just to find a way to be effective and find a way to stand out. So um just super, super instrumental in my development.
That's interesting that you bring that up about how he would take you at 6, 7, 8 years old and play against much older guys. How do you really think that helped you shape and morph the game of basketball in your life?
It's big, just because I've never been the most athletic or the biggest or the strongest or whatever you could say, most skilled, whatever. I've never been that, but I've always found a way to stand out. So, I got to attribute that to those moments, because when you're a kid and you're shooting a ball against a grown man and he blocks it over the fence and everybody laughs, that's not a good feeling. So you got to find a way to adjust and make up for lost ground. So just, I think, starting at a young age, being competitive and wanting to be able to have an impact no matter who I was playing against, something I owe him, definitely, big time.
So, going back to your dad, what do you think is the biggest lesson that your dad taught you at an early age that you just continue to apply nowadays as a professional player?
Just the amount of work you got to put in. You hear all these horror stories about parents like forcing their kids to get in the gym, or we got to make 5,000 shots before dinner and stuff like that. My mom and dad, their mentality was never that. It was more so, hey, if you want to get in the gym, we'll be there with you. So, just super blessed to have that foundation and that support system, because it didn't matter what hour of the day, what time of the year. If I wanted to get in the gym, I knew somebody was going to have my back and be in there with me. So, um, not everybody has that. So, super fortunate to have that.
Along with your dad, you mentioned your grandfather as well. Talk about that relationship between the two of you. What was that like growing up?
So my grandfather played, for those who don't know, he played at West Virginia. And back in like the 50s and the 60s, West Virginia was kind of considered like the Duke of modern day basketball. You hear about Hot Rod Hundley, Jerry West, Rod Thorne. My grandpa was kind of in that same category coming out of high school. I think him and Rod Thorne were the same freshman class. They played on I think it was an undefeated freshman team. So they were scrimmaging against Jerry West every day in practice. My grandpa didn't have the quote college career that he would have wanted, but still going to West Virginia at that time was crazy, just because of how big basketball was regarded in the state and how big the university was at the time. So just that family basketball tree has meant a lot.
Looking back, I mean, obviously, grandparents and even, immediate family members like your mom and dad always seem to have great stories, but the grandparents just it's just a very sneaky story every once in a while. Looking back at the stories that your grandfather told you about, like you just said, playing against guys like Jerry, playing alongside Rod and all these different guys. Do you have a story that just always sticks out?
Man, so not particularly on that, but just with him, and kind of my basketball development, uh, every day. So middle school was South Charleston Middle School, where I went to school, started, I think it was 8:45, one of the later starting middle schools in the country or in the county. And there was three basketball courts for those that are familiar outside of South Charleston Middle School. And he told me from day one, he was like, "Hey, I'll be there before school with a basketball in my car, sitting outside if you want to get some work in or like come shoot." So it was every day of my middle school career that his car was parked outside the basketball court beside the school. So if I wanted to come and shoot or whatever, he was there with the ball in the car to hang out or watch me shoot or go over stuff. So uh, just again, I know I keep harping on the support system, but I mean that he took time out of his day every day before school for me to get some work in if I wanted to. So uh, that's just super special to me.
Before we continue talking about your high school career, I want to ask you about this because you mentioned middle school, and then obviously a lot of those guys you played in middle school against, you obviously went toe to toe with them in high school. But looking at the competition during your life growing up, describe the competition in the Canal Valley, just in high school or just in general.
It's good. I think West Virginia kind of gets super slept on. We're a small state, so I don't think we get the respect that quote North Carolina and the hoop states and all that gets. But I would match. I would stack up West Virginia guys against anybody all over the country. But I just think I think that makes us who we are. You see so many West Virginia guys that do make it, that have their chip on their shoulder and have that underdog mentality, and I think that's what makes the state special.
I'm just look like it's crazy you're mentioning this because a lot of these guys that were in this Class AAA first team, well, just all the All-State teams for that matter in 2014. I mean, you had you, like I mentioned, you were a captain. CJ Burks, who eventually went on to play at the collegiate level, very successful. Brandon Napper, he was a sophomore whenever you were a senior, and he went on to play at WVU. Rondell Watson, your future teammate at Marshall, went to Greenbrier East. Another great guy. Even Trayvon Wesco from Musselman. I mean, I know I'm going broader than the Kanawha Valley, but just looking through these names, I mean, it's just unbelievable. So yeah, no, I agree with you. But when you look at you mentioned how West Virginia is a small state, and that's really why this podcast is what it is because you get a lot of these different stories. When you go out of state or even out of country for that matter, and they're like, "Oh, so where are you from?" and you say West Virginia, what's the look on people's faces whenever you do say that?
Oh, they're like, "Yeah, are you close to Richmond?" Like some people don't even know West Virginia is a state. So it's just back to that underdog chip on your shoulder mentality. Like they don't most people they don't even know where we're talking about. So it makes you that more hungry and that more driven just to come out on top.
You've mentioned that word a few times, that hungriness, that drive that you have to have as an athlete. Where do you think that originated from?
Oh man, I'd say it's got to go back to those park days playing growing up at Joplin Park in South Charleston. Uh, you know, I was always like one of the youngest players out there, so we had to get there early to get in the first game. Because if I wasn't in the first game before there was 10, I probably wouldn't get picked up because nobody wants the little kid on their team. My brother was out there, so the little kids. So if you didn't win, you're going to have to sit out 3, 4, 5 games, and that's kind of time constraining right there when you're having to sit out a long game. So from the youngest age, it made you kind of value every game. Like, hey, if I don't win, my day might be over. It might be just time to go home because by the time I get back up, the games might be over because you have to sit out so long. So just taught you how important winning was and what all it takes to try to win every game.
I'm going through your senior season, the postseason that you all had. So you all in Region 3, Section 1, you all defeat Capital by 18, 83 to 65, and then you all lose in the Section 1 final to South Charleston by 7. But then you guys go on, then you guys have to go on the road because of the system, how, if you're losing your sectional final, you have to go on the road. So you guys go on the road to Woodrow, a 20-4 Woodrow Wilson team, and you all beat them by 4. When you look at that section and that region, I mean, those are some quality teams. And then also looking at Greenbrier Reese, as I've mentioned already, with Rondell Watson, How difficult was it to play against these guys, or was it difficult to play against these guys just on a night in, night out basis?
Super difficult. Just because we talked about the talent level and those names you mentioned. I mean, all those guys. Several of them are playing pro ball now to this day. I know Brandon Apper's still in college, but C.J. Berg's playing pro. Rondell Watson's played pro. Those guys played at Marshall. We all played there together, so very familiar with them. But I was just super fortunate to have the coaching that I did in high school. I finished my senior year at George Washington playing for Coach Green. So you're talking about a legend in the coaching industry in West Virginia. So, that definitely factored into how good my experience was. And I ended up getting good results my senior year. So I've got to give him a lot of credit.
In what way did he help you continue to mature, continue to grow outside of what you already were as a basketball player? You mentioned your grandfather and your dad, but go from the side of Coach Rick Green. What did he do that really continued to push you and just open up different doors for you throughout your junior and senior year of high school?
I think I was just super serious about it, super locked in. And he taught me to just kind of relax and just enjoy it, man. Like it's a game, it's a serious game, but you want to have fun doing it. So, just taught me to just take a deep breath and go with the flow. Whatever happens, happens, but leave it all out there. So, super fortunate development wise to have him.
So I had mentioned in the beginning that you averaged 31 points per game your senior season, and then coming out of high school, you were a two-star recruit. When you look back, obviously you're going to feel like you were under recruited, or you might have felt like the ratings didn't mean that much or whatnot. But coming out of high school, do you think that you were considered one of the better players coming out of the state? I mean, obviously the two stars are out there, but at the same time, I mean, you posted 31 points per game. I mean, and you won Mr. Basketball your senior year. So there was a lot of things going at play for you. But just talk about that and how difficult that was to try and manage that throughout your senior year.
It was frustrating just because I always thought that I was a big time player and that I could play at the highest level. So when I wasn't getting those big time schools recruiting me, it was super frustrating. Coming from West Virginia, where there's only two Division I schools, if neither one of those are recruiting you, on your resume, it doesn't look real great. So why should these outside schools come in and recruit a guy when his own in-state universities aren't looking at him? So um, it was frustrating, but it just taught me to keep going. Everybody's got a different journey. Everybody's got a different route. And, I ended up going to VMI just because of the system and how it fit me and stuff like that. But also it was kind of in spite because I knew it was a place that wanted me compared to some of these bigger schools that passed up on me.
Before we talk about college, looking back at high school, is there a guy or two that, whenever you used to go to bed going into a game, you're just like, oh boy, I gotta go against him tomorrow evening. Did you ever have a guy that gave you the most trouble in high school?
Not really. My favorite games were like the George Washington, South Charleston games, the George Washington Capital game, just from that that rivalry standpoint. And growing up in Charleston, everybody knows everybody, so just that atmosphere and that type of game was always the ones I look forward to.
So then along those lines, then what is your favorite either Capital or South Charleston moment?
It would probably be the sectional game my senior year against Capital. We were playing at George Washington, and I think we were down at halftime. And Coach Green comes up to me, and this was one of those like, if you lose, your season's over game. If you win, you still have a chance to go to the state tournament. And we were down at half, and Coach Green kind of comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, man, like, we need you to get going, or season's over." And I ended up getting super hot the second half. I had 5 points at half. I finished with 45 for the game. So it was one of those games that you'll remember forever, just because I could have probably thrown up a hook shot and it might have went in.
Well, it's going back to what I said earlier about whenever I played pickup against you. I mean, that was probably the exact same way. I mean, geez, unbelievable. Some people just don't understand, man. That's all I have to say. But okay, so cool. So going out of high school now, you go to VMI. Walk us through that because some people may know, some people may not know. Talk about what that experience was like and then how you ultimately came back to West Virginia.
So my dad played at VMI, is in the Hall of Fame there. My brother was on scholarship at VMI as well. So when I went there, started summer school. The year started. My grandfather got really sick, and like we talked about, that was dude was a crucial part in my development. Super close family member. So he got super sick. My brother and I sat down and were like, "Hey," they were telling us it was terminally ill, stuff like that. So we kind of sat down with my family and we are like, "Hey, it's bigger than basketball at this point. Like, we'd like to come home and help take care of him because he probably doesn't have much time left." So I ended up leaving VMI, was out of school for a few months, taking care of him. And, it was really sad because, like, he just deteriorated sickness wise, bad stages of cancer, paralysis had set in where he couldn't walk around, stuff like that. So you're talking about this dude that you idolized your whole life, and this was this heroic figure, deteriorating away. So, I'm super glad that I left VMI when I did, just because I got to spend those last several months of his life with him. Some of those memories there will last forever. So, super sad story, but after a few months, I decided to enroll back in school, and Marshall was the closest Division I school to where I was. So, ended up going there, walking on. I enrolled in the school before I even talked to Coach D'Antoni or anything like that. So, how it all ended up playing out was just nuts, in my opinion. And how it worked out was phenomenal. But leaving VMI was ultimately a tough decision, but I don't regret it at all.
So then along the craziness side of that story, getting associated with Coach D'Antoni and the Thundering Herd, walk us through that, because that's a story in of itself. How did that all play out?
So, I had a lot of friends that were familiar with Marshall or played at Marshall or coached at Marshall, that had that relationship with school. And I just kept telling everybody, I was like, "Look, I want to go to Marshall. It's the closest school. I don't care what's happening. Like, I'm betting on myself that it's going to work out." Um, so I enrolled in the school in January. I think it was like January 12th when the second semester started. And I met Coach D'Antoni, say it was January 12th, was a Monday. I met him Monday morning at like 8 a.m. in his office. He gave me a meeting. He was like, I introduced myself, told him my story. He had heard of me, but he had never seen me play. He was like, "Well, you got a good pitch. Here's a jersey. I'll see you at 3 o'clock at practice. We'll see what you got." And he gave me a tryout. So I guess he had talked to some people about me and they kind of gave him an update, but still he had never seen me or formulated an opinion. So he was like, "Dude, here's a jersey. I'll see you at 3 and then we'll see what happens. No guarantees on anything." And boom, it all worked out pretty well.
That's a story in of itself. I mean, that's just unreal. So, okay, so let me ask you this then. Was the intramural side of the story correct that I said in the beginning?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was a walk on the team, and I wasn't allowed to travel to road trips. They had long weekends where they'd be out of town. So I was like, had a couple buddies from GW and South Charleston and Huntington that were like, "Hey, like, play on the intramural team. Like, you don't have anything else going on." And I was like, "All right, cool, man." So I'm just this no name walk on that's like sitting out playing in the intramural game, and ended up scoring 100 points in a rec game. Next thing I know, like, my Twitter and Instagram feeds blowing up, like, Marshall walk on, Jon Elmore goes off in the rec. And like, so it was kind of my introduction to the school and to like the people around the area of who I was and what I could do. And yeah, it all started in intramurals, man.
So, did Coach D'Antoni ever see those videos?
I don't know if you ever saw those videos or not, but I know that I had like a rough first day of practice when he gave me that tryout, and he kept bringing me back. So I'm fortunate that they didn't give up on
Maybe that first day was kind of like, okay, don't do that.
me.
But okay, so cool. So I had mentioned before the skill and the athleticism of a lot of different guys in the Kanawha Valley. You mentioned them as well, playing against guys like, again, on teams like South Charleston and Capital. But talk about the level of competition in Conference USA and how unique it was, and how you kind of fit in to that conference playing at Marshall.
You know, with all the conference realignment stuff now, it's kind of crazy to think about. But, when I was there, I think Conference USA was kind of a slept on conference just because it's a mid major. But the conference had like phenomenal results in the NCAA tournament every year. I think at one point like it was like 5 years straight. Conference USA had won their first round matchup in the NCAA tournament. So, when we made the NCAA tournament, we ended up winning our first round matchup. So I think it's just tribute to some of those small schools that kind of get swept under the rug just because they don't have all those big time ESPN deals or playing on national television or a Power Five school. So being that kind of mid major to kind of make it on the national scene, something to always stick with me. But it's just kind of that mid major mentality, like we're the underdogs. Let's see what happens.
Going back to Coach D'Antoni, you've been able to be mentored and coached by a variety of great individuals. But when you look when you look at Coach D'Antoni, what's your favorite Coach Dan D'Antoni story?
Oh, just talking about how free flowing and how much of a player's coach he is, and like just how much he enjoys the game. There'd be times in practice where we'd be literally practicing like half court pull up jumpers. Like that was just his approach to it. Like he was just so free flowing and have fun with the game. And I mean, there was times we had a new assistant coach one year, and like it was one of his first practices, and we're practicing like throwing like no look alley oops to somebody, like catching it under the basket, trying to like reverse dunk it. And the coach is like, "Is Coach D'Antoni serious right now? Like, what's he doing?" And I'm like, "Dude, welcome to the show, man. Like, that's just who he is. He just has fun, and he's the ultimate players coach. He's a guy that you just love to play for, and just gives you confidence to play the game. So, super fortunate to have him."
When you look at his style of play, I mean, you mentioned, the loose practices that you guys had, I mean, the openness, just being able to just have fun with it, be able to soak it all in is my assumption of what you're saying. But when you look at his style of play, I mean, obviously he had some stints in the NBA. Everybody knows about his brother Mike, who was a head coach for the Phoenix Suns. When you look at his style of play, how did you really see yourself fitting in all of those years at Marshall?
So that was kind of a factor into one of my decision to go there. My favorite player growing up, Steve Nash, and up until probably like 6 months ago when I was in Europe and my mom kind of redid our house, I had a Steve Nash fat head in my room.
Good
So
fat head reference.
even though I had even though I'm 26 now and I'd moved out of my parents' house, like still on my bedroom wall at their house was a Steve Nash fat head. And my mom called me the other day and was like, "Hey, like, I'm sorry, but I'm taking Steve down. Like, I think you're old enough that he's got to go." So that was always my favorite player growing up. And, I was always familiar with the D'Antoni name being from West Virginia. But at the same time, he was coaching my favorite player in that type of system. So uh, it was really just a dream come true how it all worked out.
You were able to play alongside some great individuals at Marshall. Obviously, I can't mention all of them because there's just so many. But when you look at a lot of these guys that you played with, obviously you were the big ticket guy on that team, and everybody else just seemed to do their thing. Everybody seemed to play along really well. I mean, when you look at your teams that you were able to play against, who's a guy that you played with the herd that gets that's very underappreciated, does not get talked a lot when they look back at those years that you played at Marshall?
The guy that sticks out the most to me is probably Stevie Browning. Just another West Virginia kid. Stevie and I roomed together in college, played together for 2 years, but he was a kid that super under recruited, coming from Logan, West Virginia, went to Fairmont State. He transferred to Marshall. We sat out together at Marshall. He transferred in, and then I transferred a semester later. So we sat out at Marshall and just had a bunch of workouts together. We ended up living together, became good friends. So I think that's a dude that doesn't get enough credit for how talented he was and what kind of performances he was able to put on.
When you look at him and the other West Virginia natives and even the coaching staff as well, there's a lot of West Virginia natives on that coaching staff. I mean, obviously, Coach D'Antoni, he's a Mullins native. Then Coach Mark Klein, Williamstown. And then Williamson, excuse me, Williamson. And then now you have Cornelius Jackson, who's from Oak Hill. Being able to be a part of a culture that you fit in on the court, but then off the court, you were able to be around a lot of West Virginia natives. Being able to be around these guys, did that really make your life a lot more comfortable being down in Huntington?
Oh, 100%. It just made like you grew up knowing all these players. Like Stevie and I played AAU together. My brother was on the team. We grew up playing AAU together. CJ Burks played against him in AAU, played against high school. Rondell played against him in AAU in high school. So these are dudes that I've known my whole life. Like you talk about Coach Jackson, Oak Hill, Coach Klein, Williamson, Coach D'Antoni Mullins. Now they've got Coach Adam Williams from St. Albans. So I mean, and that I think that provides or that adds to like the support you get for the school when fans come to the game and they're watching people that they've seen grow up or play their whole life. Like I think that adds to the culture and that adds to the program. So what they've done with reestablishing the West Virginia connection and those relationships, I think is crucial.
Now that you are playing professionally, going back to what I said about West Virginia, but obviously, talking with Chase Harler, played at WVU Wheeling Central as well, as you know, he went out of state and overseas and he heard Country Roads playing. I'm just wondering, have you ever just been like walking along the streets overseas and you're just like, I know that song from somewhere. Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So in regards to that, we're playing in Lithuania this year. We're playing in like 5,000 seat arena. I want to say it's maybe January or February, early January, early February, and we're warming up for the game. And I mean, in the middle of Lithuania, there's like everybody speaks solid English because it's a more modern country, but I don't know anybody. And I get out there about an hour and 20 minutes before the game, just doing ball handling, and I'm shooting. And I kept hearing, hey John, and I'm like, who's calling me by my first name? One, and like, who's speaking English like that? Like, what's going on? And I look over and I see this couple. It's this man and his wife wearing Marshall gear, and I'm like, dude, what is going on? Like I run over there, like they give him a hug, and like they were really like ended up. He worked for the State Department. His wife and her were stationed over there. They were huge Marshall fans, and they were best friends with like one of my dad's best friends. So like just that random West Virginia Marshall connection in the middle of Lithuania in January. I mean, it just shocked me, but it just shows how small the world is sometimes.
Well, as the saying goes, there's always a West Virginia connection. There's always a connection. But so anytime I have somebody on from Marshall, I love asking this question. I mean, I've asked it to Jared West, I've asked it to Tamar Slay and Adam Williams as well. I'm going to ask you the same question. But the saying goes, whenever you leave Marshall, you become a son of Marshall. And whenever I ask you, what do you think of whenever I say son of Marshall, what comes to mind for you?
Immediate flashback to like winning the Conference USA tournament, winning the first round matchup against Wichita State. It's literally just like a roll of images goes through my head of just moments that'll stick with me forever. Getting engaged to my wife, going to football games, stuff like that. So, Marshall's a small school, and everybody says the little brother to West Virginia, but it's just super special in its own way, and the memories that I made there, like you say, son of Marshall, the daughter of Marshall, whatever, is just. I mean, immediately I just have like flash moments in my head that just super moments that'll stay with me forever.
So going back to you playing in intramural basketball, you mentioned your social media just blew up. And then you fast forward a few years and then boom, you're in San Diego, you're in the NCAA tournament, and you're playing Wichita State. And I remember this because, I'm always on social media, but in high school, I'm just scrolling through and all of a sudden you just keep seeing Jon Elmore, Jon Elmore, Jon Elmore does this against Wichita. It was unreal. Whenever you look back on that game, is there a moment throughout that game that you just always sticks out to whenever somebody says Marshall versus Wichita State 2018 NCAA tournament?
A couple moments. It was I think we were down like 3 points, like it was starting to get later in the second half. And the shot clock was winding down and I caught the ball on the sideline and like took like a step back, like no look three, and kind of like slung the ball at the rim at the last second. And it swished. And I'm running back down the court and their coach is just like shaking his head. And I'm like, dude, I don't know how that went in. And then you got like Jared West hit a huge three towards the end of the game. It was really kind of like the dagger. And then a couple plays later, I think it was one of the last plays of the game, CJ Burke steals the ball and goes down, dunks it. and the whole place just erupts. You know, there wasn't that many Marshall fans, and there was a lot of Wichita State fans, but then there was a lot of just basketball fans there in general for the other teams or just people supporting the tournament. And I mean, by the end of the tournament, I mean, by the end of that game, if say there was whatever, say if Marshall had probably 1,000 fans and Wichita State had 5,000, whatever, the whole rest of the gym by the end of the game was rooting for us. So you just heard that whole environment just kind of go start cheering for the underdog. So that's something that'll stick with me forever, is just how the gym turned into like all Marshall fans as the game progressed.
And then we won't really stay on this topic long, but I would assume being able to play against West Virginia in that second round game was just a real unique storyline because you had two in-state rivals playing clear across the United States in the NCAA tournament. What was that like for you, just being able to play against the other Division I school in West Virginia?
Like you said, I wish we could have played at the Civic Center in Charleston, man. That would have been a lot more fun for everybody. But you know, they had a heck of a team that year. They ended up losing to a tough Villanova team in a close game that they probably should have won. But you got to give them credit, man. They kind of beat up on us. You know, I wish we could have played them again and seen what would have happened, because I know I played bad. I think our team played bad for the most part, and they got rolling. So credit to them. But dang, they got us. They handled us. And if I could go back, I'd want to play them again just to try to do things a little differently.
We'll talk more about the TBT here in a second, but since we're talking about that game between West Virginia and Marshall, hey, I'm just saying, I'm not predicting anything, but we could see a date, and I mean a date because it's two of the alumni teams here in the state. We could see it. We could. What do you think that atmosphere and that environment would be like if we do see a West Virginia versus Herd that game?
I think it would be sweet, man. You know, West Virginia kind of looks down on Marshall, and Marshall looks at it as like a rivalry game. So you know, each school kind of looks at it a little differently. But you know, I just like the idea of that game because it's only two schools in the state. You're either a Marshall fan or you're either a West Virginia fan. But then there's some of those people that are fans of both, which is cool to me. So you know, I think it means a lot to the state and the people to have that game, just because you could say it's a rivalry, whatever, but it's those two schools playing, representing the universities on a national scale. We're talking about a nationally streamed game all over the country. So it just highlights the people and the players around here, which is cool to me.
Okay, we're going to talk about it now because we'll come back to Marshall in a second, but we're talking about TBT. TBT is right around the corner. I'm excited about it. I think it's one of the better sporting events during the summer. But I mentioned how this will be your fourth season playing in the TBT, started playing with the Wildcats in 2019. Looking at all of these years that you've been able to play in the TBT, how has this tournament grown since the first year that you competed in it?
Just the players are getting better. The attention it's getting, like you said, it's one of the premier sporting events of the summer. And I think people are starting to realize like how high level the basketball is, because you're talking about the people playing in this game are the best basketball players, or the people playing in this tournament are the best basketball players in the world, not in the NBA, you know? So this is highlighting overseas pros. This is highlighting college basketball legends that have just went crazy and just did insane things throughout their career. So it's just super cool that people are starting to catch on and see how high level it is. And also, you're playing for $1 million. So that's a lot of incentive for guys to play hard right there.
Oh, absolutely. I'm right there with you. So along those lines, how different is this year's Herd That team compared to what we saw last year at the Charleston Coliseum and Convention Center?
You know, we have the same Marshall quarterback. I think we had 6 alumni last year. We have 6 again this year. So, you know, we keep that Marshall core together. But each year we try to upgrade our roster and try to get a little bit better. You know, on paper, I think we look better this year, but you really never know until the first game starts. But the tough thing is with this is you don't have a full season to practice and go through the ups and downs and, you know, try to play your best basketball at the end of the season. We've got like 4 or 5 days of training camp, and then boom, you lose one game, season's over. So we try to get guys that we think can mesh as quickly and as well as possible. And then try to put out the best product we can.
Do you think you all have become a part of what this TBT identity is, that on any given day anybody can go down? And I say that because looking back at 2020, when you all were in that TBT bubble as the number 23 seed, I mean, you guys went toe to toe with a lot of great players. I mean, everybody remembers your brother Ott and what he did with the bow and arrow each and every game, going toe to toe. Everybody kept saying it's the battle of the Titans between Ott and Joe Johnson. I mean, that time period was just unreal, and I love that because it's a unique story. But looking at it, do you guys think you guys have become the identity, or more or less the what word am I trying to think of? The darling. Yeah, let's say it like that. Do you think you guys have become the darling of the TBT each and every year?
I think our team is kind of representative of what the tournament is and has become. Because you're talking about a Marshall alumni team. One, a lot of people don't know who Marshall is, but okay, then you say, okay, it's a small school, right? So then you're talking about a Marshall-based alumni team going toe to toe with Floyd Mayweather's team. Are you talking about Ott, dude on the team who still plays at the Y, matching up against the NBA soon to be Hall of Famer Joe Johnson? You know what I'm saying? So it's just, there's so much that factors into why the tournament's great and why it's so appealing for people to watch and appealing for us to play in. So there's so many factors. But like you said, I mean, it's phenomenal basketball and it's a lot of fun, and there's $1 million incentive. So you've got the underdogs playing against former NBA legends, and then you've got us matching up with Floyd Mayweather's team, who's got guys that played in the NBA, and we've got dudes that didn't play pro basketball on our team. So it's just a neat event.
What's it like for you all? Well, let's say like this. What's it like for the core six that you mentioned, being able to play not that far away from Charleston and not so far away from the Charleston Coliseum and Convention Center, just to be able just to go right up 64 and boom, you're right there. So you guys did have a lot of great times, especially with a lot of great former Marshall players as well, playing in that venue and stuff like that. What's it like for you all just continuing to play in that regional?
So it's special for me because, when I was in middle school, I played at it was called the Civic Center. Now it's Charleston Coliseum. I played there in middle school. I played there in high school. State tournament was there in high school. I go to Marshall. We play West Virginia there my freshman year. And then now fast forward however many years later, 4, 5, 6 years later from my freshman year, I live 2 blocks from the Charleston Coliseum. So every time I leave my apartment, I drive by the gym. So it's special to me because this is where I'm from. This is my home. And it gives, most people, once they graduate college, they never put on a jersey again. A lot of dudes don't play pro, but now I play, but I'm overseas. So it's hard for my friends and family to ever come watch me again. So this is an opportunity for everybody in my hometown to come check out the games, which is special to me. So it adds to it.
Along that, having the TBT in Charleston at the Charleston Coliseum, what do you think it means for the state of West Virginia to have a nationally televised event like the TBT come to the capital city and produce the numbers that it has, last year, what it did last year? How valuable do you think that is for the state?
Man, I read an article last year just talking about like what type of revenue it brought in and the money it brought into the city and the state. After we had got eliminated last year, I was standing there like in the corner outside of our locker room, and the mayor was right there, and she came up and she was like just super thankful and appreciative of what we had done and what West Virginia had done to kind of get it brought here. So I mean, you're talking about there's 8 regions all across the country in the biggest cities. You've got Syracuse hosting a region. You got Dayton. You've got New Mexico. Every New York. I mean, all these places are hosting regions, and now we got one in Charleston. So I think that's a credit to like how we heard that has kind of carried ourselves and the time and effort we put into it. And the same thing with West Virginia, how much they put into it. But then it comes down to the support level. Like they want to go places where they know they can sell tickets and have good environments. So Charleston's turned up and showed out for the games in the past, and I think we need to keep giving them a reason to come back. So, got to sell a lot of tickets so it gives them something to keep coming back to.
Well, I think I can speak for a lot of other people. I think we're going to be expecting a large crowd come Sunday evening in that evening session. So I mean, seeing Marshall at 5 and then West Virginia at 7, I mean, that's going to be quite an evening for a lot of different people. But I want to talk about your professional career as we move towards the end of this podcast. But looking at your professional career, how do you think you've been able to maintain this identity as a sharpshooter and just a creative basketball player overseas? I mean, I mentioned that you just finished playing in Lithuania, averaging 16 and 6. How do you think you've been able to consistently keep this up?
Just the drive and the work. You know, in my head, my goal is to still make it to the NBA. Like that's my peak of the mountain, and I think I'm still climbing the mountain, and I'm still as driven as I've ever been to try to get there. So um, there's a lot of work being put in, but I still feel like I can get better. So I'm just trying every day to keep pushing towards that. I don't know where I'll end up next season, whether I'll be back in Europe, whether I'll be in the NBA, whether I'll be in the G League. You never know what's going to happen, but it's just a matter of taking it one step at a time. Everybody's got a different route, and I get paid to play basketball for a living, so it's just super fortunate, and I don't take it for granted. But I'm still working, trying to climb the ladder.
So you've been able to play in a bunch of different countries already. By my count, I'm saying 4 or 5. Is that correct when I say that you played for 4 or 5 different countries in four or
Um,
five different countries?
Italy, Greece, Hungary, Lithuania. Yeah,
Yeah.
4.
So when you look at the culture changes that you've been able to go through with those 4 different in those 4 different countries, what's that like trying to adjust to everything? Is it difficult? Is it just okay? What's that like?
It's something I've learned to do. It's part of being a pro is you have to kind of be able to adjust no matter what situation you're thrown into. My rookie year, I had a tough transition into the European style of play and the physicality of the game and living in Europe, being away from family. But, as I kind of got the kinks out, I slowly got better. My numbers got better. So it's just a matter of no matter what situation you're thrown into, just capitalizing and making the most of whatever role you have.
Going back to what we had discussed earlier in this podcast about being a West Virginia native and being able to do what you've done in such a short amount of time, what advice would you give somebody like you here in the state of West Virginia that wants to pursue a professional basketball career, but they're not sure how to go about it, or even just the drive and motivation with it? What would you say to somebody like that?
The biggest thing, and I know it's cliche, is like there's really no substitution for hard work. Um, Anything worth having never really comes easy. So there's no skipping steps, there's no cheating the grind, etc. It's like one of those things that you really got to work for and got to put a lot into it every day. So um, I know it's cliche, but like you really have to grind and you really have to hustle to try to get and achieve those goals.
In what way can individuals try and get better? I mean, obviously, the saying goes, you just can't go into a gym, get some shots up, work on your free throws, and that's it. What if you could provide insight on this? What are some ways kids can go into a gym or even go to a playground for that matter and just really just hone in on their game and get better? What would you advise?
I think you can never just you can't skip the basics. Everybody wants to shoot threes and everybody wants to do highlight dunks and everybody wants to cross people up. But at the end of the day, like you've got to know how to dribble, you've got to know how to pass, you've got to know how to shoot, and you've got to know how to play defense. So just working on those little things every day. And everybody sees social media and everybody sees these highlights. That's what social media is. It highlights everything. It highlights the special moves, it highlights the game winners, stuff like that. And everybody wants those posts, but there's so much more that goes into it that gets lost with social media. So it's just a matter of sticking with the basics and starting from the ground up. And it's almost like building a house. You got to lay the foundation, and then you got to start pouring cement, and then you got to build the rooms, and then you've got to add furniture and all that. And there's no skipping the steps. So it's just a matter of working every day and perfecting each little thing.
When you talk about the food side, I mean, I know a lot of this talk has been about basketball, but along with just the identity with this podcast, I like to talk about food, especially if it's a with a professional athlete like yourself. So you've played in 4 different countries, as you mentioned already. What's the best cuisine that you've had overseas?
Italy, no question. The pizza and the pasta there was next level. I put on a little bit of weight my rookie year, and there was a lot of pizza, pasta, and wine. So I had to kind of start dieting a little bit and just be a little bit more selective. But the Italian cuisine is elite.
Now I see. It seems to me that you may be the kind of guy that goes on these wine tours, over in Italy. Did you ever? Did you ever do that?
No, no. I wanted to. There was a lot of like special historical vineyards, but just with the basketball schedule and that whole side of it, there wasn't a whole lot of time to travel. So we were able to go sightseeing some, but I didn't get to any vineyards.
Now, did you ever get to, whenever you would go when you would go in town and get something else, did you ever have like a go-to place in Italy that you're just like, okay, I know if I go here, I'm gonna be stuffed by the time I finish eating?
Yeah, so I was in Trieste, which is like a port city, right on the coast, and like if I walked out of my apartment, it'd be like 3, 4 blocks, and I'm on the water. And there was this pizza place. It's like famous spot in the city that my wife and I would always go to. That like looked out on the water. So just those memories are like I'll carry them with me forever.
Now, I would assume that along with the food overseas, you kind of have to come back to reality when you come back over here into the States because, hey, I said it earlier. You went to South Charleston. Your dad went to South Charleston. You're a Charleston guy. Spring Hill Bakery. I would assume that their
Ooh,
pastries are a lot better
yes.
than Italy. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, it's not even up for debate.
Good.
Spring Hill pastries, top of the food chain.
Spring Hill is also not a paid sponsor for this podcast. We just like to promote good food and good pastries as well. So that's why I bring it up.
Okay.
So okay, so when you talk about the homey feeling overseas, has there ever been a point where it was you just felt like it was too difficult or the adjustment just wasn't what you really expected? Did you ever have that moment where you're just like, I don't know, I'm just not sure if this is quite it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So it was early on in my rookie year. My phone stopped working, and it was like almost the same day the AC in my apartment broke, and I wasn't playing great. So like I'm over there like sweating in my room. My phone's not really working. The service is bad. My Wi-Fi's out. Like it was just like a domino effect of just tragedy going on. And I'm just sitting there like almost teared up a little bit. I'm like, dude, I don't know if this is for me. Like I got a public communications degree from Marshall. Like there's a lot of things I could do right now. What type of jobs would I get in? And I'm like, dude, I might need to just do something different. And my whole mentality was like, dude, let me go to sleep. Let me wake up tomorrow and see if I feel the same way. Woke up the next day, like my phone, like the Wi-Fi kicked back on, like it was working again. And I was like, boom, that was one of those moments that stands out to me because I had hit that wall. Like I was so close to just like, it's over. Like the dream's done. I can't do it anymore. And made it to the next day and, I was refreshed and got back after it. But there was definitely a few points where it was like, maybe it's time to try something else.
So from a basketball player or even an athlete's perspective, and I talk about this a lot on this podcast. That's the mental health side of things because I mean, I'm not saying that you would deal with it, but I'm just saying from that story, it seemed like you were just battling with it, and you're just like, I don't know. The psychological side definitely kicked in, but when you look at the mental health side of things for athletes, especially professional athletes, since there's a lot asked of you, is it difficult to try and cope or even understand everything that's going on, especially when you're playing overseas and just in a completely different country than what you're used to over here stateside?
No, man, that's a great question because I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Is like the mental health aspect of it and how important that is. The biggest thing I learned in a lot of leagues in Europe, you play one game per week. So it's like you play on Saturday or Sunday. You have like a day off. Say you play Saturday, you got Sunday off, then you practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then you play again on Sunday or whatever. And it taught like mental health wise, like say you had a bad game. Well, then you think about that bad game the whole week leading up to the next game. Well, that starts affecting like your practices because you're thinking about like, man, I had a bad game. You start like almost forcing the issue because you're like, man, I gotta play better. I gotta work harder. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. Like I can't have that happen again. And then you have another bad game, and it's like a whole nother week. So then you go a whole month of like not enjoying the process, not enjoying what you're doing because you're so focused on the bad game. Yeah, it's almost like football, one game per week, and you've got all week to think about the next game or think about what happened. So there's so much psychology wise, whatever the word is that goes into it, where it's like you've got to just stay confident and stay level headed no matter how high the highs are, how low the lows are. You've got to kind of stay in that lane no matter the ebbs and flows. And that was a big thing I've learned and kind of adjusted to is that's half the battle is like, physically you could be in great shape, strong, 100%, but then mentally you just like, I don't believe in myself, and that changes everything. So it's just a matter of staying confident and believing in yourself and trusting the work that you've put in.
You mentioned how your ultimate goal is still to play in the NBA. You play with the Boston Celtics summer league team following your senior season at Marshall. What do you think it would take for you to play in the NBA?
I think just the right situation at the right time. You hear like some of these NBA players that have taken crazy journeys to get there. Most people know Patrick Beverly. A lot of people don't know that Patrick Beverly played in Europe for several years, like played in Russia, played in maybe Ukraine, Israel, wherever. That's a guy that had to grind and had a different route to get there. PJ Tucker, guy that played in the NBA Finals, guy that's played in playoffs the past several years, played maybe 6, 7, 8 seasons in Europe before he stuck in the NBA. So, it's that reoccurring theme of everybody's journey is different. Some people have the easy route where they're a first round draft pick. Some people go undrafted, play in the G League, and get a call up, and then their lives change forever. So, I'm just banking on and hoping, it may work out, it may not. But at the end of the day, I'll know I left it all out there. Hopefully, it ends up in the NBA.
One of the reasons why I asked that question is because it seems because I follow your brother on Twitter. It seems like anytime Odd tweets, it's you saying how is he not in the NBA? And it's right. I mean, posting numbers like you do overseas. I mean, and again, I think a lot of it has to do with patience, and that will lead me to my next question, and that is how much of the game of basketball off the court is patience compared to just attacking everything as possible.
So right now, for instance, so my agent lives in Europe, and um, his job right now is to find me jobs and market me to teams overseas. Um, and he's having all these conversations with GMs and teams over there. And I'm sitting here in Charleston, West Virginia, and I don't really know what's going on. So, like for my first couple of years, I was on edge like every day of the summer. Like, hey man, I need to update. Like, what's the deal? Like, where's my next job gonna be? What level? Like, I need to be prepared. When am I leaving? But now I'm just like, whatever happens, happens. Whatever develops, develops, and I'll make the most of whatever situations presented. And it's kind of just a matter of getting lucky. You don't really know what you're getting into. It's like when you take a new job, you don't always know how it's going to turn out. It's just about having that positive mindset going in. So I just try to stay level headed and make the most of whatever opportunity comes next.
Well, I mentioned him, and I would feel obligated. I would feel guilty. Let me say it like that. I would feel guilty if I did not mention your brother. I mean, you were able to play with him growing up, played at Marshall together. Now you all are playing on Heard That together. What's it been like for you just be able to play with your brother throughout all these years?
Oh, it's been super special just talking about how close we are relationship wise and everything. I grew up, he's 2 years older. I grew up playing on his AAU team. So since I could walk and dribble basketball, we've been on the same team. I was always playing guard. He was always the shooting guard. That was always my backcourt mate. So it's just special. And like the TBT is cool because my dad's coaching as well. So it's just a huge family affair. My mom gets to come to the game. She hadn't seen me play professionally in the past couple of years because of COVID. So it's just cool how everything comes full circle.
And before we end, I'll end on this note. I know it's gonna be a weird note to bring it up, but with COVID, how much of that did that affect you professionally, playing overseas and just being shut down even?
So I was in Greece last year, not this season, I was in Lithuania. Last year, I was in Greece for it was a little over a month. That was my kind of first contract. And I'm in Athens, right? And Athens is the tourist destination. Everybody in the world knows where Athens is, the Greeks and all the statues and the all the structures and the art, whatever. I had to have it. Greece was in government shutdown because of COVID. I had to have special paperwork to leave my apartment just to go to the grocery store and to the gym. Like if I got pulled over and I didn't have my documents, like I would be in trouble and get fined. So I'm in Athens and I saw the grocery store by my apartment. I saw the basketball gym and I saw the away team's basketball gyms. Like I didn't get to explore anything. I leave Greece and go to Hungary and it's the same thing, like countries in lockdown. So um, it made you really locked into what you were doing because it was literally just basketball and family time in the apartment at that point. So uh, hopefully it made me stronger.
No, absolutely. I completely understand. I mean, that's just funny that you had to have your documents with you. I know it's cliche to say that, but I just think it's fascinating because we're so used to the customs and we're so used to everything over here. And you go over to a different area, you're just like, man, what am I doing over here? Why is it like
Right,
this?
right.
But no, I understand it, man. But my man, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to heard that and seeing you all play tonight. I mean, is released on Sunday. Heard that will play at 5. So good luck and good luck with the whole entire tournament.
Thank you, man.
Absolutely. That will conclude episode 116 of Hoops Across the Mountain State with our terrific guest, Jon Elmore. You can follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Kennedy7 for all the latest about this podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as well. And I will catch you all next week on episode 117. Thank you all for listening and stay safe.